It's Victory Monday here on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Jacksonville wins. The Bengals win. Do you win? Let's talk about that and a whole lot more here on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Jeff Erickson here with Nick Whalen. It is indeed Victory Monday. Feeling pretty good right now. Trevor Lawrence looking good. Joe Burrow looking good. Bengals and Jaguars both win. It's a good day. How we doing, Nick?
Doing great. We're doing great. How could I not be after that Jaguars game-winning drive? Just such an un-Jaguars way to end that game.
Yeah.
I will say, we got to jump right to the end. I don't know if I wanted the Jags to go for two there. I felt like the way they were moving the ball, they had just gotten a big stop, forced a turnover on the Ravens. I felt like you're at home, take this thing to overtime. I kind of like your chances there. But to me, it was one of those like, no. Okay, fine. Great decision by Doug Peterson.
Right.
To go for two and finish that game off. But man, I've been saying all year long, I want to see back-to-back good games from Trevor Lawrence. I think the Jaguars making the playoffs. Yeah. And mathematically, I guess they're still technically alive, but that ship probably sailed a few weeks ago. The rest of the season to me is about Trevor Lawrence proving that he's that guy. And, he's nowhere near Zach Wilson territory where he could play his way out of this job by the end of the year. I think he has just such a higher floor than a player like Wilson. But, I was starting to doubt whether or not this guy had a future as a truly elite quarterback in the NFL. And look, these last 3 weeks have been, I think, bar none, the three best games of his career. And to string those games together in a row, that to me has been really encouraging. And honestly, what we saw yesterday, this was probably the crowning achievement of his career so far. So again, this is going to be somewhat of a lost season for the Jags. Maybe they're probably going to win one or two too many games to prevent them from getting a high draft pick. But if Trevor Lawrence finishes out this season strong, if he plays like he did on Sunday, 80% of the way the rest of this season, I'll be happy. I think that coming into this season, that was the number one goal for this Jags franchise was, all right, we kind of had to throw out Lawrence's rookie year. The Urban Meyer situation threw everything off to a degree that we couldn't even evaluate him. But the number one goal is we need to come out of this season knowing what Trevor Lawrence is. And I'm not saying he's developing into a star, but man, he's taking the right steps.
He sure is. And I think it's important to establish a winning culture. I think that's more important sometimes than the higher draft pick. You're not looking for a quarterback in this draft. So that helps a little bit. There's still a lot of other amazing talent, but there are so many bad teams this year. It's tough to one up them. I mean, I think it's fine. I mean, they're 3-3 at home too, by the way. I mean, they know how to protect their home turf. They got to go out and win on the road. They had that one win against the Chargers, which is going to end up looking pretty weird, I think, at the end of the year, because the Chargers, I think, are going to end up looking pretty good. Yeah. Not just that they won, but just how they won. But the fact is they're capable of that. They did this without any Travis Etienne, essentially. He had 2 carries, limped off, and, that they did this. And, Christian Kirk got hurt a little bit in that game, came back in, was fine later on. But he only went 4 for 46. It was the Zay Jones show. It was the Jermichael Hasty show. There's a lot to be encouraged by. Yeah. Forget the high draft pick. Go get those wins. Players play, coaches coach. Mm-hmm. Let the front office and ownership worry about tanking.
Yeah, you mentioned that Chargers game. I mean, that's probably going to be their biggest win of the season. I mean, they won that game by 4 scores. And of course, that was right after Justin Herbert was banged up. So I don't know that you're getting, that full Chargers team all the way back in week 3. But nonetheless, I mean, I think they're going to be looking back and saying, we lost to the Texans and the Colts in back-to-back weeks. We also lost to the Broncos. I mean, those are egregious losses in retrospect. You win even one of those games, I think you start talking yourself into some playoff scenarios here. I was guilty of pulling up the old playoff simulator last night, looking at the in the hunt graphic. Again, chances are the Jags are not going to work their way into this, but they're at Detroit next week. That should be a winnable game. They do still have to play the Titans again. You don't feel good about that. They get the Cowboys, they get the Jets, but they do have another game against Houston. Like you said, though, I think there is something, especially when you have seemingly your franchise quarterback in place, there is something to establishing a winning culture. It's like, it'd be great to draft number 3 overall, but you're not hunting for that quarterback anymore. So I think you still feel pretty good whether you're drafting 3rd or 8th or 14th. Like, you're still going to add some value there. There's not this pressure to get the 1st or 2nd overall pick to land that quarterback.
Yeah, that's right. I absolutely agree, and I think that's encouraging. Okay, so does Lawrence take the leap next year that he is a top 10 quarterback, top 7 or 8 guy that you're starting every week?
I think he's on that trajectory right now. Yeah, it depends how he finishes this season. I'm looking right now just at the very basic, quarterback fantasy rankings. And look, is he going to be better than Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, Burrow, Lamar? Probably not. I don't know if that's really attainable in terms of fantasy production. So that's 5 right there. So the guys you're comparing him to, can he be better than Justin Herbert? Again, probably not. So to me, he's somewhere in that 7 to 12 range. So yeah, I mean, I think he's likely a lower end starter. I think he's somebody that you're probably drafting with the same, kind of the same regard that we took like Tua or Stafford this year. Guys who are like, yeah, I'm not going to pay up at quarterback. Like, you're not drafting Trevor Lawrence in the 4th round and saying he's going to take this huge leap and be the 2nd or 3rd quarterback in fantasy. I don't think he has that kind of ceiling, but I think if you're taking the wait on quarterback approach, I think he's somebody that could absolutely be a lower end every week starter. You're probably still going to want to have somebody behind him for insurance purposes. I don't think he's someone that you just set and forget at quarterback. But yeah, the Lawrence that we're seeing, man, these last 3 weeks, it is night and day in terms of accuracy, night and day in terms of decision making. I mean, just the number of throws he had in the 4th quarter alone against Baltimore yesterday. I mean, this was the guy that we were sold coming out of Clemson. So you could tell, I mean, where I am now versus where I was a month ago in terms of enthusiasm when talking about Trevor Lawrence. I've done a complete 180, and it's interesting. I mean, both Lawrence and Justin Fields, seem to be kind of following this same type of trajectory. Although, of course, we did not see Justin Fields on the field in that game yesterday against the Jets. But just to wrap up Ravens Jags, bizarre fantasy game, as you noted. Not a huge game for Mark Andrews, not a huge game for Christian Kirk. ETN goes out early. I mean, he went back to the locker room. I was starting to get nervous. Obviously, he missed all of last season with a foot injury. Turns out it wasn't all that serious. Doug Peterson said he was technically cleared to come back into the game. They just didn't want to risk it. So that led to a lot of JaMychal Hasty. We got a Snoop Connor sighting at times in this game. But other than Lamar doing Lamar things for Baltimore, Josh Oliver gets the touchdown through the air. Deshaun Jackson had a long reception late in this game. And then Zay Jones, 11 for 145. Did not
unguardable.
Have a touchdown, but yeah,
unguardable Zay Jones.
Big play after big play after big play for Zay Jones. And yeah, he's been a kind of a favorite target of Lawrence throughout this year. I mean, it hasn't always equated to fantasy value, but man, what a win for the Jags. And I think the bigger question long term as it pertains to this season, because the Jags are not going to be in it. Does this make you feel any worse about the Ravens? I mean, they've just been such a roller coaster. Like, just when it seems like they're figuring things out, they're peaking at the right time, they have this letdown game.
They didn't look good against Carolina last week either, and we wrote it off due to the weather and Lamar feeling ill. Lamar was dealing with a hip this week in practice, something to watch for there too. Yeah, I mean, they are doing the opposite of peaking. We thought going into their bye, they had that big stomping win over New Orleans on the Monday night game, and you're like, all right, it's all setting up. Everything's turning up Ravens here. Their schedule's nicer than the Bengals and all that. And no, it's not. I've come away disappointed. Even when they win last week, you're like, they barely squeaked that out. If it wasn't for Baker Mayfield, they might not have. But and one other thing about the Jaguars is, hey, pretty prescient for them to add Darrell Henderson for free. This, even if you don't need him, if there's talent out there, you grab it.
Yeah, I love that move. It came last week, after we did the pod, and didn't really get to discuss it on the XM show either. But yeah, I think you framed that well. It's just there's talent there. We're going to grab talent, and the Jags have their long-term back in place in ETN. But I think if you could basically go get someone for free and give him a 5-6 game tryout at the end of the year, see if you want to bring him back, likely on the cheap next year. Totally okay with that. The last thing I'll say about this game, by the way, terrified at that Justin Tucker attempt. I think it was 67 yards.
It looked like he was going to make it too.
I thought it was good from 85 off the foot. I mean, it was right down the middle, and thankfully, that heavy air down in Jacksonville, I think, knocked it down. It fell about 5 feet short. But man, I mean, I don't know.
That would have been the most Jaguars finish ever, right?
Oh, I mean, yeah, right. Well, they gift them great field position, and I mean, you shouldn't even get a look off like that. Especially with Justin Tucker of all guys, like, you need to kick that deep. You got to do whatever you can to not give them the ball at the 40-yard line and give Justin Tucker what I thought was a makeable look. So It's never easy with the Jags. That's always how it goes. You think you got it won on the 2-point conversion. Of course, they found a way to give Tucker an attempt, but man, what a game.
Gus Edwards was the feature back, although Lamar actually had, the more yards running, but Edwards also lost a fumble. Lamar lost a fumble in this one too. There was just these mistakes that they made. Kenyon Drake he's almost droppable now. It's just, the problem is Gus Edwards can be hurt for a game because that's what he does. And all of a sudden Drake's in a good spot, but it's week 13. It's not stashing season anymore either. So there you go. Yeah. Ravens get the free square game next week. They get the host of Broncos. Whereas the Jaguars are at Detroit. Fun game offensively, possibly there.
Oh, big time. A huge big cat battle for the big cat round robin this year. That should actually be a really, really fun game, but between two teams that are in very similar positions in their respective conferences. And we'll get to Denver. My goodness, man, that situation just continues to devolve. And I think maybe other than the Texans, that's probably the number one team you want to play right now. So, like you said, we did see kind of a mini letdown by Baltimore last week against Carolina, but got to think you're in a pretty good spot at home against the Denver Broncos. And then after that, you got 3 of your final 4 in the division at the Steelers, 4 of your final 5, I believe. Steelers, Browns, Falcons, Steelers, Bengals to finish out for the Ravens.
Yep. At Cincinnati to finish the season. So that could be pretty wild there to see if that happens there. All right. Happy fun vibes continue. Bengals go to Tennessee and out physical the Titans. Even the Titans acknowledged that after the game. They held Derrick Henry to 38 rushing yards and 17 attempts. They ran for over 100 yards themselves, something that no team has done the last 7 weeks. Joe Burrow only got sacked once, was rarely touched. He didn't have a massive game, 22 for 337 for 270 yards and a touchdown, but there weren't those huge negative plays, unlike the playoff game last year. 9 carries for 32 yards. Samaje Perine had some good, tough runs. Travion Williams even kicked in. T. Higgins just bossed over there on the right side in single coverage. They found something that worked. But for the way the game was ending out, they might have put up more points on the board. They actually pulled points off the board thanks to the way the bizarre finish of the game of that personal foul penalty attacking the defenseless long snapper.
A vicious play.
Yeah. It's a good rule, and it was the right call, but it's a weird way to end a game for sure.
Yeah, it looked like the Titans were going to have another chance, to go down and try to tie this game. Would have been a 7-point game with the McPherson field goal, and like you said, it's the right call. It's one that you never like to see given that situation, but it is what it is. And the bigger issue for me was Tennessee had multiple chances to end that final drive. The Bengals put together a 12-play, over 6-minute drive to kill most of the clock at the end. Tennessee, somewhat of a controversial decision with about 6 minutes left. They take the points, cut the lead. They were down 20-13. They trimmed the lead down to 4. I think in retrospect, it's easy to say, well, you should have gone for it. They had a 4th and 5 at about the Cincinnati 20. Obviously, you'd prefer the touchdown, but enough time, I think, where it's justifiable to take the points and kind of play the field position game and hope you get it back. I think Tennessee was right to trust their defense, and they just couldn't get off the field. They could not get off the field. Cincinnati didn't even face a 3rd down until the end of that drive. Joe Burrow really, really effective in the short passing game. You mentioned only 1 sack on the day. That was clearly a point of emphasis, was if you're dropping back, you're getting that ball out really quickly. I think a huge spot for Cincinnati to pull this off. We thought Jamar Chase would be back. Turns out he wasn't. Obviously, Joe Mixon not involved in this game. And once again, I think T. Higgins is making a pretty strong case that he is the pretty clearly number 1, number 2 receiver in the league, if that makes sense. I mean,
right.
That
he's
guy,
a 1B. He's not a 1. He's not a 2. He's a 1B.
He's a number 1 for half the league, and he's only a number 2 in Cincy because Jamar Chase is there when he's healthy. But he was fantastic in this one, 7 for 114 and the touchdown. Hayden Hurst had a couple huge grabs, and once again, I thought Cincinnati did a really, really good job stacking up Derrick Henry. 17 for 38 goes Derrick Henry on the ground. Did have 1 long play where he should have had a touchdown, fumbled it inside the 5-yard line. That Traylon Burks ends up jumping on it anyway for a touchdown. But fantastic job by the Cincinnati defense to win this game without 2 of your 4 best players on offense.
Yeah, yep, exactly. Very satisfying. And they went undefeated in the month of November. They're 7-4. They're tied with the Ravens now. Schedule doesn't get any easier. They face the Chiefs next week. They still got games against the Bills. They've got that. You mentioned the game against the Ravens. They've got a game against the Pats. They've got a game at Tampa Bay later on. They've got their own issues. We'll get to that. But yeah, basking in victory today. This was a very satisfying win. And it's a hard schedule, but other teams have to look at that schedule and say they have to play the Bengals. So the Bengals found something there. And one of the guys they found was their second round pick, Cam Taylor-Britt. With Awuzie out for the season, their best cover corner, Taylor-Britt has really stepped up. He's the guy that stripped Derrick Henry on that long play. He had 8 tackles. He had 12 the week before. It's he that's getting all the work, not their first round pick, Dax Hill. Dax Hill doesn't see the field that much. Taylor-Britt, though, on the other hand, he's the guy that's getting all these reps and looking good. Eli Apple actually had a good game. They got DJ Reader back in the middle. I can't tell you how nice that is to have. He is so good. So that was a really stout defensive effort there. Every single 12 different players tackled Derrick Henry yesterday. It was pretty wild to see that, including Mike Hinton with this big hit. Little Mike Hinton, it just lit him up. So, very satisfying win. I mean, the Bengals tried to give it away early. They had a lot of penalties. T. Higgins had a drop that was really bad, but they didn't have the turnovers. They didn't have the killer plays. They did scuttle a lot of drives. Special teams, like 3 punt returns in a row, they got penalized. It was wild. They were kept on starting inside their own 10. But all in all, all's well that ends well. It was a very good game. Very happy.
Yeah, 5 straight punts to begin this game by both teams. It was a bit of a sluggish start. It kind of felt like, 2 boxers circling each other, kind of teams feeling each other out, not wanting to be too aggressive early on. But this was really, really impressive by Cincinnati to go and do this on the road. This is second week in a row we were talking about Tennessee being overvalued. They go to Green Bay and get the win, come back home, and Cincinnati, man, Joe Burrow is this is not news to you, Jeff, but just unbelievably steady. I mean, it is crazy for a guy his age, the amount of confidence that you have in him. It really is Tom Brady-esque. And look, it's like comparing someone to LeBron or Jordan. Like, you're not saying he's going to be Tom Brady, but the kind of quiet confidence that Joe Burrow inspires in these type of situations, that there's really not another young player in the league with that. Trenton Irwin, by the way, huge catch in this game for the Cincinnati Bengals, stepping up with no Jamar Chase. It was really the only thing he did all day. Played 52 snaps. He was very clearly their number 3 receiver. Obviously, once Chase is back, which we expect will be next week, Trenton Irwin probably drops off, but essentially played just as many snaps as Tyler Boyd in this game. And I believe they reviewed the play that was ultimately ruled a catch, and that was a huge one.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, it was transparently a catch. One cheek equals 2 feet, as they say. And he got his butt cheeks down on the field with plenty of room to spare. Next play was the go-ahead touchdown to Higgins. They ran the same Roger McCready, the young kid at Auburn. It was dinged at the combine for having short arms, and they put him out on the island 2 plays in a row, and that worked out pretty well. Yeah, very, very good times there. So Bengals host Kansas City next week. Titans have to go to Philly. So, Titans are going to be fine. They're going to win their division. They're going to have a home playoff game. And then we'll see after that.
Yeah, perks of playing in the AFC South, I'll tell you that. But, Chiefs-Bengals, in almost any other scenario, that's easily the game of the week, especially with this being in Cincinnati. I think most people would still say the Chiefs are the better team. But, this game being on the road, that standardizes things a little bit. But we got Dolphins-Niners next week as well. I mean, that's a potential game of the year.
They got an early window, late window. Oh, they're both in the late window, actually.
Both in the late window, yeah.
Wow.
Would not mind one of those getting flexed, but I don't think we're going to see that.
I think it's too late to declare flexes.
Yep, I think so too.
Yeah, all right. Before we go on to our next set of games, we took care of Victory Monday. Let's go ahead and take care of a note from our title sponsor, No House Advantage. No House Advantage is changing the game by offering the most dynamic fantasy sports platform available today. Playing pick'em contests versus other people for the shot at winning big cash prizes. Download the app, choose a contest, select your player props, earn points for correct picks, and climb the leaderboard for your shot at hundreds of thousands of dollars every week. You can also test your skills versus the house and 20 times your entry if you hit all of your picks. Bet on up to 5 player prop over-unders or individual player matchups across every major sports league, including NFL, NBA, MLB, PGA, MMA, and NASCAR. Sign up now with promo code NHAWIRE. That's NHAWIRE at nohouseadvantage.com, or download the app on the app stores to get a first deposit match up to $25. Make sure to check out No House Advantage today and experience daily fantasy sports redefined, because it's not just how you play, but also where you play. You won't want to miss out on this. Big thanks to No House Advantage for their season-long sponsorship with us. We alluded to it. Let's just rip off the Band-Aid, as we like to say, and talk about the Denver Broncos and Carolina Panthers, because why not?
Man, we knew this would be ugly. 33 points is more than I thought would be scored in this game. I'll tell you that. Did still hit the under. I think this one closed around 36, which was the lowest total of the year. But man, I mean, Denver. This was how many times have we said this feels like rock bottom for the Denver Broncos, and it continues to get worse and worse and worse with each passing week. I mean, we saw the dissension kind of spill over with Russell Wilson getting into it with one of the Broncos defenders. Downplayed it after the game, as you'd expect from Russell Wilson. But the reality is that the Broncos have lost 7 out of 8 games. They are completely directionless. This is far and away the worst offense in the league. They seem to have no plan. With each passing game, they are losing faith in their quarterback, even the way that they're handling him. Late in this game, they recovered a muff punt. Were unable to really capitalize on that. They get a late possession on a onside kick. They go 4 and out. The game was over at that point, but even in these kind of scramble situations where the other team is essentially knows it's going to win, normally you'll see a team be able to tack on a score. Like, no matter the context, this Broncos offense cannot move the ball. And, they kind of got Latavius Murray going in this game. I mean, over half his yardage came on one long run. So the 92 yards on 13 carries, maybe a little bit deceptive, but I don't know where Denver goes from here. I mean, if you were on Twitter yesterday afternoon, all you're seeing is breakdowns of how much money they owe Russell Wilson over the next 4 years. And it's just, it's one of those things where, like, I think the obvious move is you bring in a new head coach. You hope that magically changes everything, but it's just not realistic. Like, I don't know what the way out is here.
Yep. There's a guy on Twitter every week that does, or maybe it's on TikTok, that does bathrooms in Russell Wilson's house versus number of touchdown passes thrown. And bathrooms are still ahead. He did throw one. He got one. Yay. But there was 2 other things. 2 things that, just stood out to me. One, they had to delay a game on a 4th and goal. That's hard to do. You got bailed out because there's a roughing the passer penalty after that. But there was this sequence where Cortland Sutton scored. Nope, wasn't a touchdown. Hey, okay, well, fine. Greg Dulcich, we started him in some leagues. He scored. Nope, penalty. Another play, touchdown. Nope, wasn't a catch. Finally, of course, Brandon Johnson gets the touchdown. Yes. Like, it took like 9 plays to get this score in, and this is just to get it to 10 points. And you're just like, whatever. It's just, he averaged 4.1 yards per attempt. It's crazy. It's just, Cortland Sutton got some targets. He got 8 targets, 6 for 75. Okay, that's fine, I guess. But man, what a disaster.
No, you said it. I mean, even the drives where they do score touchdowns, I mean, their touchdown drive was 14 plays to go 77 yards. And you're like, okay, that's good. You're chewing up clock. It's like, no, you're down 23-3 at that point. Like, you can't be having a 14 play, 6-minute touchdown drive when you need points. Like, it's
Shades of Atlanta, Cincinnati. Remember that?
Right. It's just grinding to a halt. It's painful to watch, really. And like, it's almost cringy. It's amazing that it took this long for anybody to get in Russell Wilson's face. I wouldn't say he hasn't been accountable, but I don't think he's been quite as accountable as he would like. That's for sure. I mean, he's still kind of reiterating his normal points that seem to always just be on replay in his brain. Like, he's just kind of saying whatever the cliche thing is at the podium. You'd like to see a little bit more ownership, a little bit more acknowledgement of, hey, I'm a borderline Hall of Fame level quarterback. We're not supposed to be having seasons where the offense is by far the worst in the league. Like, there are other veteran quarterbacks who've struggled this year. This is not an Aaron Rodgers situation in Green Bay. Like, at least with Rodgers, you could say maybe he's slipped a little bit. Some of the accuracy issues, obviously the thumb plays into that. Like, Russell Wilson looks like a completely different player than he was 2 years ago. Like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know. Like, what if you're the Broncos? I mean, obviously I think this is on track to go down as one of the worst trades in North American sports history, which is a big statement to make, but it's hard to think of something that's been this disastrous. I mean, you really have no choice but to ride it out. And I mean, right. Do you other than switching up the coaching staff, is there really any path out, or is just who the Broncos are for at least the next couple of years before you start to think about just, cutting bait with Russell Wilson and eating that money?
So we cut bait with the coaches first because they're not tied to the salary cap, And you maybe see if a different coach reaches him. Maybe that's a big part of it there. Maybe that happens. I want to see him being angry though. I just want him to be like throw things, be angry,
right?
Do something about it. I don't know, but it's frustrating. Meanwhile, it's the malaise is spilling over to the defense. I mean, they would not have won the 18 points in regulation challenge this time. They gave up 23. Sam Darnold, 0 sacks. They allowed him to throw 8.6 yards per attempt. Deonta Foreman went for 113, 4.7 yards per carry. Chuba Hubbard went for another 65. I mean, yeah, I can see they're probably like on the field a bunch. I gotta imagine it's just devastating every week to see this. So you saw the defensive tackle snap at Wilson, which, hey, maybe snap him out of it a little bit there. DJ Moore didn't seem cowed by Patrick Surtain. I got to rewatch to make sure all those big plays were against Surtain, but he went 4 for 103 and a touchdown, had the 52-yarder. I mean, this was a pretty impressive performance.
Yeah, it really was. And, if you dig into some of the numbers on Carolina, it's like it wasn't like they came in here and steamrolled the Broncos. I mean, the Broncos basically handed this game to Carolina. Like, Panthers are 2 of 12 on third down. Sam Darnold played well enough, made a couple of deep throws, had on that long one to DJ Moore. You've probably seen the highlight by now. He kind of held up the follow through almost like a Steph Curry 3-pointer. Like he knew it right away that he had thrown a perfect ball. Did seem to reinvigorate DJ Moore a little bit. Carolina almost had 200 rushing yards as a team, but wasn't an overly efficient day for guys like Chuba Hubbard. And, they were basically like watching the end of this game. They were just running those guys right into the middle of the line over and over and over. So it's not like you're necessarily looking for gash plays at that point. But this Denver team, if they go down more than a touchdown, the game's virtually over, right?
Yes.
I mean, they are not built to come back from a 2-score deficit. They can come back from a 1-score deficit. We've seen that against Jacksonville in London. But, as soon as Carolina went up 17-3 on the second drive of the second half, this game was over. At no point did I consider that Denver could climb back into it.
Right. I agree. And it's unbelievable to watch just how bad they can play. It's really remarkable. Carolina's off next week. We mentioned Denver at Baltimore. Before we move on to the next game, all of our podcasts are brought to you by the Blue Wire Network. Thus, we play their ads. All right. Thank you for your indulgence. Thanks to the Blue Wire Network for hosting us. Let's move on. Let's talk a little Tampa Bay Cleveland. And Tampa Bay, the Denver Carolina game reminded me of the Tampa Bay Carolina game, where it's just they're just hopeless. You just didn't see a path to a comeback for them. Tampa Bay, they had this game in hand, and then they decided, do not want. I mean, this game was fun for a while. It was 10-7 after a quarter. It was 10-10 at half. The second half, the Bucs scored 1 touchdown, and they lost Tristan Wirfs. It looks like they're going to lose him for a while. And they walk out of here with a loss. They still lead the division because they happen to be in the NFC South. They're 5-6 and they're in first place. But I mean, Carolina's a game and a half out. Atlanta's a game behind them. It's this weird setup here.
It really is. And it feels like everybody's just waiting for Tampa Bay to grab hold of this division. And like you said, they had so many opportunities to close out this game and just could not do it. They went up 17-10 midway through the third quarter, punted on their next 4 drives, allowed that late touchdown to tie it up, had a chance at the end. Once again, could not move the ball, could not get into field goal range, punted twice in overtime. I mean, really didn't even threaten
that's
to
hard
score
to do.
And just handed the Browns the game. I mean, and it's not like they went for it on a 4th down and Cleveland took over at the 40. I mean, they allowed a 70-yard drive, punctuated by a bunch of big running plays. Like the Tampa Bay run defense did not show up in this game. Nick Chubb, 26 for 116, let up a long rushing touchdown to Anthony Schwartz on a reverse. Jacoby Brissett, I didn't even think played all that well, other than leading, a big opening drive. It feels like Cleveland comes out and scores on the first drive every game. And then from then on, it's kind of a bit of a struggle session. But Tampa Bay, man, the big question coming in was, we talked about this all week on XM. Did they discover anything offensively against Seattle in Germany? That was a completely different Tampa Bay offense that we had seen all year. Everything indicated that maybe that was the outlier. But a lot of people, I think, thought they had turned the corner. Turns out they had not, in fact, turned the corner. And the second half of this game, it was back to the first 8 weeks of the season for the Bucs, where it's Tom Brady just dropping back, just throwing up, basically just kind of close your eyes and throw it up there. Hopefully Mike Evans comes down with it. If not, we're going 3 and out and we're punting. I mean, completely abandoned the run in the second half. It's just short passes, 2-3 yards at a time. And that's really all this Tampa Bay offense had to offer. So to me, I kind of, it's looking like that Seattle game a couple weeks ago that, again, that was the outlier. And, I think this is the team that they've been all year. It really is.
Agreed. Nick, Rachaad White was running great. 4.6 yards per carry, 14 for 64. You played a 5-quarter game and he got 14 carries.
Crazy.
I mean, why? He did have 9 catches, and 9 catches on 9 targets. So a lot of dump offs went to him. Mike Evans, 9 targets, only 2 catches, 2 for 31. I mean, they got to unlock him. I mean, Godwin had a good game, 12 for 110 and the touchdown, 13 targets. They just couldn't connect with Evans. And that maybe it's just, Denzel Ward. We got to give credit where credit's due to Denzel Ward. They were playing with that. The Browns were playing without Greg Newsome in this game too. So, I mean, you gotta tip your hat on that. But just a pretty disappointing appearance. I mean, White looked good. I mean, I can't blame White. I mean, you could say they missed Leonard Fournette just maybe to have 2 of them. And they just went away from him. It's just they had that 35-yard run early, and they just didn't use him, like Matt Leahy says here. He went 50 yards in his first 2 to 3 carries, and then they abandoned the run.
They just seem to throw the offense on autopilot at times. They had 3 and outs late in this game, and these were all right. If they get a score here, this game's over. Even a field goal at that point, with how well the defense was playing at the time, you felt like just one score was all they needed. On all 3 of those 3 and outs, they began with a first down run that went for 2 or 3 yards, and then 2 incomplete passes on second and third down. I mean, it was such a predictable script. I think the Browns knew it was coming. Cleveland did a fantastic job getting to Tom Brady late in this game, took 3 sacks. All 3 were huge. Myles Garrett was all over him. Jadeveon Clowney had a big one on a third down late in the game. I mean, I don't know if with Tampa, if it's, playing in that division, you just don't feel the sense of urgency. Obviously they're not thrilled with how they're playing, but it just doesn't feel like this team should be sitting in first place and still very much in firm control of their own destiny. I mean, they're 5-6 at this point. This is not a good team. This is not an above average football team.
Yeah, exactly. I won't say any much about Jacoby Brissett because it's Deshaun Watson this week and his return against Houston. So I wonder what that does for, how much he lifts everyone. He was an elevator before, as Alan Soslowski likes to say. Mm-hmm. We'll see if that's the case going forward. David Njoku with just like the game-saving, incredible 4th down catch. He didn't do much before that, but, he showed he's capable of that. Amari Cooper didn't have much of a game until that 45-yard play at the end. He had bad drop on 4th down earlier. Yeah.
I mean, it looked like a potential game-losing drop at that point. And yeah, like you said, rebounded well. The Buccaneers had their chances, and it just felt like, I mean, by the time Cleveland got the ball back for their final possession, you knew Tampa wasn't getting it back. So it felt like, all right, we're either getting a stop here or we're ending in a tie. And look, I don't think Tampa Bay gave up. Really bizarre play by Carlton Davis, where it looked like it was almost like an NBA player trying to take a charge. And he just, kind of went for the drawing the push off penalty, did not get it. That was a horrific decision by him. And it essentially, ended it right there. And yeah, man, I don't have much else to say about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think this is who they are, and yet I still would pick them to win this division.
Yeah, they're still in first place. Mathematically, they're still the favorite, and I think talent-wise, they're still the favorite.
Yep.
Big game on Monday night where they host the Saints. The awful, terrible, no good Saints. I mean, they're the Saints. I like the idea of the Saints. They should be better, but they're not. They become like the worst team to watch. They're just so boring.
Yeah, they're rough. I mean, I'm looking at division odds real quick before we move to the Saints. Buccaneers are minus 400 to win this division. That is absurd right now. I mean, they're Falcons plus 750, Saints 10-1, Panthers 16-1, minus 400 for this team. I mean, this is we make fun of the AFC South, and rightfully so, but the NFC South might be just as bad, if not worse, on the whole. But talking Saints, they get blanked by the 49ers, which, by the way, the 49ers have now pitched 4 straight second-half shutouts. They are riding a 6-quarter scoreless streak by that defense. I mean, they are – every year it feels like we go through this phase around this time of year where the Niners start getting healthy. Obviously, they made some big trades this year, and, man, they are that team that nobody wants to face right now. They are the trendy – are they actually the best team in the NFC narrative that you're going to hear. I didn't think San Francisco played all that well in this game.
Offensively, they didn't.
No, not really. Saints defense showed up. I mean, 29 carries for 96 yards on the ground for the 49ers. Jimmy G was okay. Had a big interception called back on a penalty. I want to say it was an offsides, nearly a pick six. That would have changed the entire game. 2 huge fumbles by Alvin Kamara. Completely flipped the script on this one as well. Saints were about to make this a 1-score game early in the fourth quarter. He fumbles like on the 1-inch line, kind of reaching out for a touchdown there. And yeah, I mean, the Niners defense, can't say enough about that. Yeah, although this is not a fantastic Saints offense by any means, but yeah, it was last week it was the offense that showed up and kind of did what we expected against the Cardinals. But I guess if there's one thing you can give the Saints some credit for, it is that the defense did show up here.
Yeah. It was one of those, not a whole lot happened in this game type of game. There was a sequence and, kind of meaningless ultimately, but like they get the Saints get a 2nd and 1 around midfield. And what do? Just boring run up the middle stuff, boring run up the middle, barely get the first down. 2nd and 1 is like time for a shot play. It's a chance to get chunk yards. You can run any play in the book. And they're just doing this conservative thing, and they're down 13-0 or 10-0 at the time. I forget which, if it was before or after the field goal, but just like, try something, do something. They did try a few shots to Olave. There was the really bad overturn, I thought, on that one catch by Olave. I still think it's a catch. I don't understand how it wasn't a catch, but
I thought so too.
Yeah. I may be predisposed to thinking that because I have lots and lots and lots of Olave, and I think he's very good at football. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's just they couldn't get anything going on the ground. Nothing on the ground. 22 carries, 63 yards. Maybe after the first 12, maybe stop doing that so much. We complained about the Bucs not running enough. The Saints ran it too few times. And meanwhile, the Niners, they scuffled. They had that 4th down play where Garoppolo said, okay, I've got Ayuk, I've got Kittle, I've got, I think McCaffrey and Debo weren't on the field for that play, but I'm going to pull it down and run. No, don't do that. Don't do that. As soon as he did that, it was like, okay, this is screwed. Elijah Mitchell got hurt in this one. Something to watch for there. They got some Jordan Mason late in this one, see what happens there. But McCaffrey couldn't get untracked. This awful game for him, actually. 11 for 32 and 4 for 17 in the air. This is not what you paid for.
No, 49ers, by the way, quietly 25th in rushing EPA on the season. And certainly this game did not help. I mean, the highs are still there, very much so. I don't think anyone views this as a bad rushing offense. But yeah, a lot of the advanced numbers show that they have underachieved a little bit in that regard. I mean, when the defense is playing that well, it doesn't really seem to matter. But, in terms of yards per attempt, they're 17th. In terms of total yards, they're 15th. Obviously they're way up there in terms of attempts, touchdowns, they're middle of the road as well. So it does still feel like, well, the pieces are in place. Like the numbers for that rushing game really have not been all that impressive. But again, when the defense is playing on this level, you don't really have too many things to worry about. Saints are dead in the water seemingly at this point. I mean, Tampa Bay continues to keep them in the mix in this division. I mean, they could convince themselves that they still have a chance here to somehow steal this division, despite the fact that they've lost 8 of their last 10 games. They get the Buccaneers next week, then the Falcons, then the Browns, then the Eagles, and then the Panthers. So, maybe not an easy schedule, but yeah, right. I mean, there are major opportunities there. If you find a way to go into Tampa and win that game next week, suddenly things could get pretty interesting.
They're 4-8. The Bucs are 5-6. I mean, it's still doable. Still possible. It's crazy. McCaffrey dealt with some knee soreness. We think that Elijah Mitchell sprained his other MCL, and Spencer Buford, their starting guard, got hurt. Was seen in a walking boot afterwards. So Jimmy Garoppolo is dealing with a sore knee. Injuries have been a big part of the Niners story all season long, and it continues here.
Yeah, took a hit to that knee initially. I mean, looked like it could have been a scary situation. You could hear him kind of audibly, groaning in pain on the telecast. Looks like he's avoided anything major there, but certainly something to watch in the short term. I mean, who's even their backup quarterback at this point? It is Brock Purdy. Purdy would be on in relief if Jimmy G were to miss any time, but I don't think that's going to be the scenario that unfolds. You mentioned Deebo Samuel briefly. I mean, did very little in this game. Did not have a catch, had 2 carries for no yards. So you basically took a 0 if you started Deebo Samuel in fantasy this week. That was disappointing.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, McCaffrey, not a big game for him as well. Yeah, I went and checked. I'm like, kind of going in and out of this game. I'm like, was Deebo injured? Was he on the sideline? Played 54 snaps, ran 35 routes, just wasn't really in the mix. Did have 5 targets, but again, did not have a single catch.
Yeah, he had a couple of runs. He got banged up on one of them a little bit. He was out of the game for that goal line sequence, the Jimmy G scramble play. So something there, and he was hurt in practice all week too. So something to keep an eye on there to see if there's any big problems as far as that goes. Yeah. Otherwise, we'll see. I mean, we'll see with them. Big game against Miami coming up here, and it's turning out to be a grudge match too. A lot of talking back and forth already, which is weird. But let's talk a little Miami. They jumped all over the Texans early, 30-0, put the game in the fridge, and they basically did nothing in the second half. Tua was getting hit, like he got sacked 4 times after they lost their left tackle, Terran Armstead. So they kind of took him out of the mix after that. They didn't get the ground game going. Here's the thing. A lot of teams have been running a lot against the Texans. They're getting increasingly, decreasing returns on that. Washington ran it 40 times. It was just kind of meh last week. But that's all you need to beat them, it seems like, too. Jeff Wilson, we were thinking to have this big game. He did score, but he's 13 for 39, and he only had 1 catch. So kind of a disappointing game for him, all things considered, especially when you knew you didn't have Raheem Mostert in this game.
Yeah, I thought this was a great spot for Jeff Wilson. And the script in a lot of ways played out, right? You're thinking, all right, Miami's going to get out to this huge lead. All they're going to do is run the ball in the second half. And they tried to do that, but didn't really have any success. It was really strange. And, I think the term literally is often overused when we're talking football analysis, but you said the Dolphins did literally nothing after halftime. And that is true. I mean, they scored all 30 of their points before the half. Tua was out of this game with about 3 minutes left in the third quarter. And I think maybe Mike McDaniel won't admit it, but I think they maybe regretted that decision because for a while there, if this defense didn't step up with a couple of big plays in the second half, I think they were going to be forced to put Tua back into this game, which is just something you don't want to do for continuity reasons. Once you pull a quarterback, you kind of get out of it. And you're like, all right, my day is done. The last thing you're expecting is to have to be tossed back in there in the middle of the fourth quarter. But it got much closer, I think, than the Dolphins expected. I think they thought they would continue to at least be able to drive down the field and get field goals. That was not the case whatsoever with Skylar Thompson, who was very limited in this game. He only attempted 5 passes, completed 1 of those. But yeah, you got to give credit to the Houston run defense. I mean, 26 carries for 66 yards for the Miami Dolphins. Decent day for Hill and Waddle, but I think when you're looking at a game against the Texans where you score 30 points in the first half, you come away a little bit disappointed fantasy-wise.
Yeah, and I think the total on the implied total or the side total bet was 30.5 for Miami too. So that's a pretty cruel bad beat there. Greg Ambrosius was tweeting about that. Terran Armstead, we got to watch that that injury. That's a big one. He had a biceps injury. After the game, they kind of said, okay, it's not that bad, but I don't know, man. That he's their big left tackle. Without him, they were pectoral strain, not biceps, but strained pectoral. I saw a report on Twitter last night saying that they downplayed that a little bit, but if he doesn't play, I mean, Nick Bosa could go pretty wild against them.
Yeah, that is a big loss, and like you said, I think most of the reaction was, "Oh, thank goodness that it's not a torn pec," which that's an automatic season ender. We usually see 1 or 2 of those per year, and I mean that's about as bad of an injury as you can have as a lineman. So I think there's a sense of relief certainly that Terran Armstead will be back at some point, but yeah, it seems very, very unlikely that he'll be available against the 49ers next week. And, this is a perfect matchup in a lot of ways, right? I mean, the Dolphins are maybe the hottest offense in the league. This game notwithstanding, maybe it didn't go quite as smoothly for 4 quarters as Miami expected, but that offense against a San Francisco defense that feels like at this very moment, it is absolutely the best in the league. I mean, this has, like we said, it has game of the year potential for sure. And I think it's going to be very, very tough for anything to top Buffalo, Minnesota, but I can't wait to break this one down all week heading into next Sunday.
Yeah. Well, Buffalo, Minnesota was entertaining. I don't think it was the best played game. I think the for quarterback sneak snap for a Minnesota touchdown fumble play. I mean, That just cannot happen. Throwing in the end zone and the interception twice in a row by, there was a lot of turnovers in that game. So that there was there was some sloppiness. I mean, the receivers, Diggs and Jefferson, I mean, that was game of the year, but I thought there was some other stuff that was kind of like, maybe not. But anyways, I'm nitpicking here. So we'll move on. Anyways, moving on to Houston. Let's talk about them briefly. Another disaster game for Dameon Pierce.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just like, as you alluded to at the top when we started talking about this game, like the Texans' overall incompetence, it feels like it is starting to poison Dameon Pierce, and he cannot escape it. We haven't even talked about the move from Davis Mills to Kyle Allen. Did not matter at all in this game. I mean, Kyle Allen basically just did a Davis Mills impression for most of the afternoon. Had a bad pick that essentially ended any hopes of Houston sneaking back into this game or covering, which a number that I think we had at 13.5. Obviously, they end up losing by 15. The overall numbers for Allen weren't terrible, 26 of 39, 4, 215. But again, a lot of that, this was a garbage time game for 70% of the day for Houston. And Dameon Pierce, 5 carries only in a game that clearly got away from Houston early on. I mean, he has 15 carries for 16 yards over the last 2 weeks, Jeff. I mean, I think we're reaching the point, bye weeks are going to be in play more so next week than in week 13. Right. But we're reaching the point where, I mean, you could still start him, but you're not confidently starting him.
I mean, he gets Cleveland this week. You think that, okay, if you can run against anybody, it's Cleveland. Cleveland and Chicago are like the 2 matchups I'm like thirsting for right now. They've already played Chicago, so that you don't get that one back. But they get Cleveland this week. This is like, I think Pierce is great, but I think he's just getting dragged down by the team context there. And just 5 carries. I mean, the Dare Ogunbowale touchdown late was a nice little just stick to the ribs there. Like, come on, really? You had to do that to us?
That's Wisconsin Badger Dare Ogunbowale. So I was okay with it personally, but I think the rest of the country probably not so much.
Yeah. Well, again, that helps everyone but you. It's
exactly
push back against the help no one crowd. Before we move on to the next game, let's share a new sponsor, our friends at Pickett. Pickett is a social bet tracking app that takes out all the hassle of tracking your bets and performance over time. Pickett connects to every major U.S. sportsbook like DraftKings and FanDuel, others, and DFS pick'em provider like PrizePicks or Underdog or Thrive and more. Once you hook up all your sportsbooks, Pickett does the heavy lifting to slice and dice your betting data. You'll get historical P&L graphs, breakdowns by team, sport, player, bet type, and more. You can also line shop for the best odds across your linked sportsbooks to make sure you're getting the most bang for your buck. When your bets are live, you can track the scores and stats of the games you bet on, as well as get player prop updates from most player prop markets. No more switching between your sportsbook app and different score apps. By far, the biggest differentiator is that Pickett syncs history and bets from all legal major sportsbooks. There is no manual entry required to track your bets. Once you have your accounts linked, it's effortless from there. The social feed and community is what turns Pickett from just a bet tracking app to a home for betting, where you can learn from others and see what others are doing and find verified content to inform your betting decisions. Visit Pickett.com. That's PIKKIT.com to download the Pickett app today. Nick, you can go drive over the Illinois border and do that there every time you go there, and then track it when you go back home. So I like that for you.
Oh yeah. That's a well-worn path for me. I'll tell you that. And look, I got to tip my cap to the location detection technology, because it is instantaneous. Like the second you cross that border, everything lights up. The sportsbook app is humming. I love it. So yeah, I've been making more pilgrimages than I expected this season, but always a lot of fun. And it's just close enough that I could justify it.
And I can't yet. It's a 3.5 hour drive to Nevada, 3 hour drive to the Nevada border, and just to be in the middle of nowhere just to do those. I mean, if I could be doing something else there, then it'd be worth it there. I might as well just go to Vegas. So thanks, California. I mean, Prop 27 failed miserably, so I guess I won't be betting anytime soon. But I can do PrizePicks. I can do that. I think I can do Thrive also. So there are outlets for me, just not as many as I'd like. All right, Atlanta, Washington. What a segue. What a game. Not really. Atlanta, I mean, they did their thing. Mariota threw it 25 times, but they ran it for 167 yards. Of course, one time they trust Mariota to throw, he throws the killer killer interception on that tip ball. I mean, it's such an Atlanta way to lose a game.
And they were running the ball so well on that drive and had plenty of time. This was not one of those situations where there's 8 seconds left and, you can't risk running it because you don't have timeouts. Like there was well over a minute left. They're just gashing that Commanders defensive line. That was impressive all afternoon. Tyler Algier, just kind of plowing his way through. And, they had converted a couple third downs on that last drive, including a big 3rd and 1 just before that. So you're thinking, all right, they're just going to keep pounding it here. Washington had just burned its final timeout. And instead, like you said, tipped and picked, just a way that only the Falcons or the Chargers, I think they're the other team that could find a way to lose a game like this. But, a big aversion of a letdown by the Commanders at home here. I think the rain, was coming down. That maybe played a little bit of a factor in Washington being a little bit sloppy in this game. But the number one guy I was impressed with, Brian Robinson, kind of got off to a little bit of a slow start after coming back. Like this was the Brian Robinson that we saw in the preseason. I mean, running guys over, second effort. He goes 18 for 105, really without any true long runs. He had 121 yarder, but other than that, it was hard-earned yards all afternoon. Was not a big day for Terry McLaurin. It was not a big day for anyone else. Jahan Dotson goes catchless. Curtis Samuel had a couple of carries, didn't really do anything as a receiver. I mean, this was a really, really ugly game, but that's what the Commanders do. They find ways to win these ugly games, and they have now won 6 out of 7 heading into back-to-back matchups now in the division against the New York Giants.
Yep. There is some pushback and maybe justified about, okay, Taylor Heineke, how is he so much better than Zach Wilson? And because Zach Wilson was winning most of the time, but just doing it in an ugly fashion. But the difference is we saw what Carson Wentz did as the starter of the Commanders, and Heineke is clearly a step up from that. He may not be good, but he's a step up from that.
He is. And there's something about him that inspires confidence, even as he is prone to playing reckless football. He had a bad interception in this game that put Washington in a bad spot, near the end of the first half. Younghoe Koo unable to convert a long field goal and really make the Commanders pay for that mistake. But yeah, a lot of the numbers, like you said, the numbers don't imply that Taylor Heineke is having like this magical breakout season by any means, but I think the guys like him, and it's a tough way you can't really quantify that, like Carson Wentz had a couple of nice games early on, led that big comeback against the Jags in week 1, but there's just something about him that even though some of the numbers say he's the more effective passer, nothing about the way Carson Wentz plays inspires confidence. And Taylor Heineke, complete opposite. I mean, the touchdown throw that he had to John Bates late in this game, I believe that was the go-ahead score. I mean, that was just a gritty, play through the rain, sliding catch by Bates. Like there is something unquantifiable about Heineke. It's like a very, very light version of like Brett Favre.
Yep. Agreed. You mentioned John Bates and Mecole Pruitt are touchdown scorers in addition to Robinson. Atlanta hosts Pittsburgh this week, and Washington goes G-Men by G-Men. So kind of a weird schedule for them coming up there. We had that last year. There was I think it was Baltimore and Cleveland played each other, had the same thing where they play each other in back-to-back games, sandwiching a bye week there. So the schedule's getting a little weird as far as that goes. You would like to see a little bit of differentiation, I guess, in schedule. At least I would. Anyways.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, at least you have the bye week separating it, but still very strange.
Yeah. All right. Let's go into the afternoon slate. Chargers, Cardinals. This was fun. You talked about teams that find a way to lose. The Cardinals have to be included in that class now too. They've done this multiple times this season, and they head into their bye. I half expect Cliff Kingsbury to get fired today.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing that the Cardinals found a way to do this against the Chargers, right? I mean, it's almost always the Chargers that find themselves on the opposite end of these games. But man, Justin Herbert, big time drive to go down and tie this game. And, I guess they bypassed the opportunity to tie it, went for the 2. We had the Chargers and the Jags basically doing the exact same thing twice this week. And the first time ever I read that it's worked for 2 teams in the same week to go for 2 in essentially a walk-off situation. We saw the frustration from Kyler Murray after the game. There's a key 4th down where I believe he ended up throwing a pick, and he basically said, "Yeah, we were out schemed. But the play that we drew up was not there, and all I had to do was just kind of throw it up and hope that DeAndre Hopkins could bring it down. He did not." Hopkins continues to look fantastic for fantasy. I mean, kind of a missed opportunity for me. I did not have him anywhere. I did not want to deal with waiting for the suspension, with kind of wondered what he'd look like coming back. I mean, he has been phenomenal since coming back from that suspension. So if you did make that investment and you did wait, it's certainly paying off. Austin Eckler remains the number one running back in PPR. Although Josh Jacobs, who we'll get to in a little bit, has eclipsed Eckler in both standard and half PPR leagues, but Eckler still clinging to the overall fantasy lead in PPR. Just another classic Austin Eckler game. 5 carries, 20 yards on the ground, 11 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown.
Yep. Not very efficient. Only 5.5 yards per target this time, but hey, or per catch, 4 yards per target, 15 targets on the day. That was kind of a theme. The pass rush was really getting to Herbert. He had to check down a lot. He got sacked 4 times. They do have a problem. No Rashawn Slater, and that matters. He doesn't have his starting left tackle. Corey Lindsey, Lindsey got hurt. Their starting center suffered a concussion this game. That could be a big deal in this upcoming week for them as well. They get a game at the Raiders, and this is pretty big for them. You mentioned Hopkins. I have 0 Hopkins also. He's my second biggest miss of the season. Josh Jacobs being my first. James Conner had a killer fumble early, but then it ended up going 25 for 120. Also had 3 catches for 20 yards and a touchdown. This is the James Conner we saw last year.
Yeah, had that killer fumble, and the Chargers immediately went 3 and out and punted, basically from midfield. So it didn't really even cost the Cardinals.
I guess it wasn't that killer,
yeah. Yeah, right. And, but yeah, like you said, Connor's starting to round into form. He's looking a lot more elusive than he was earlier in the season. DeAndre Carter looked good for the Chargers. He goes 7 for 73 and a touchdown. Keenan Allen had a score in this game, a big one in the second half. No Mike Williams, of course, for the Chargers, who they're sitting at 6-5. To me, they still feel like a better team. Obviously, back-to-back losses against the 49ers and the Chiefs, both of those being close games the previous 2 weeks. They should be in a good spot against the Raiders, although we'll get to them. I mean, they completely spoiled my best bet this week. I love Seattle in that game. I did not see the Seahawks giving up 580 yards of total offense to the Las Vegas Raiders. That running game is rolling. But after that, we get a Chargers-Dolphins showdown in week 14. They get the Titans, the Colts, the Rams, and the Broncos to finish out. So, those Dolphins-Titans games, those will be tough. But if you're the Chargers, you got to like your odds finishing out with the Colts, Rams, and Broncos the final 3 weeks of the regular season.
Yeah, they could finish strong for sure. So big road game at Vegas. We'll see what happens there. The Raiders, let's jump right into them there. Wild game. I mean, just the Raiders are playing dial my number here. And I almost feel like they should have scored more than they did. They scored 40. They had the big run by Jacobs at the end, and that just put a nice little punctuation, an exclamation point on my complete and total utter failure this year. It's not just that I merely don't have Jacobs. It's that I faded him. I told people to fade him. I stayed away from him. I said I advocated against him. Aggressively wrong. And I hate that.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, man. I'm sure SXM has the tapes somewhere of us saying, we were wondering if Josh Jacobs would even be on this roster for a while. To be fair, all the indications were pointing that way. I didn't even consider taking Josh Jacobs at any point. I mean, I thought it would kind of be like a Cam Akers type of situation. And if you burned a pick on him, you weren't getting anything. And not only it'd be one thing if he was just having like a nice year and he's just like an every week starter. It's like, he might be the best fantasy back in the league right now. 33 for 229 and 2 scores in this one. Obviously that 86 yarder at the end of the game, doing a lot of work there, but he was having a fantastic day even before that. 6 for 74 through the air on 7 targets.
Yes.
Like that's been something like that's been a big addition to his game this season, is being a volume pass catcher. We saw it last week as well. I'm completely lost when it comes to this Raiders team. I have not been burned more by any individual team this year, whether we're talking fantasy, whether we're talking ATS picks for the site. I thought this was a great spot for Seattle coming in off the bye, big bounce back spot. Some people back on the Raiders after they beat the Broncos. I cannot believe how far the Seattle defense seems to have fallen. All the indications midseason was they were rounding into form, and the 2 back-to-back major letdowns against Tampa Bay and the Raiders.
Yeah, that's right. I think that people maybe, Geno Smith was this nice story. He's fun, and he actually still had a pretty big day, 328 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. I think teams are kind of like approaching this like, okay, we'll be ready for you now. You were a fun little story. Now let's see if you can beat our best. Now it's weird to say that with the Raiders, but because there wasn't a whole lot of best. But the Raiders, I'll say this, they stopped the run yesterday. Kenneth Walker got the 2 touchdowns, but is 14 for 26. He really had a hard time getting on track. They wanted to say, okay, we're going to make Geno beat us. Geno threw the pick. He got sacked 3 times. He did have 2 touchdown passes, though. DK Metcalf went nuts. Lockett had the touchdown, but only 3 catches. And, they kind of just they bottled up Kenneth Walker for the most part. It's weird to say for a guy that scored 2 touchdowns, but they bottled him up.
Yeah, they really did. And he's kind of going through his own version of the Dameon Pierce treatment these last couple of weeks. 24 carries for 43 yards against Tampa in Vegas. And this Raiders defensive line came to play. Max Crosby was amazing all afternoon. Geno only took 3 sacks, but he was under a lot more pressure throughout the day. Lost a really bad fumble, kind of reminiscent of the one that he lost in Germany against Tampa. That was when it was a tie game early in the 4th quarter. That was deep in Raiders territory. Like you said, overall, Geno did play well. Had the pick, had the fumble. Those felt like really big plays at the time. But at the end of the day, if you told Seattle, look, you're at home, you're going to put up 34 points in regulation. Do you think you win this game? You would say, yes, of course. You don't expect to be giving up that kind of yardage and those kind of points to a Raiders team where Derek Carr threw an interception on the first play of the game and threw another interception 2 drives later. They were trying to hand Seattle kind of a nice early start, and the Seahawks politely declined to take advantage of that, and it came back to bite them.
Did you see the on Twitter? It's going around right now where on one of the interceptions, a Seattle player came off the bench to block, so they had 12 people on the field.
He just couldn't help himself. Yeah, he was so excited. I think he initially thought like the play must have been over, and then he's like, "Well, I'm already out there. Might as well throw a block." I don't think it was flagged either, right?
No, it's just one of those things that happened. It's beautiful.
So funny.
Seattle faces the Rams next week. We'll talk about them momentarily. Before we do that, though, let's share one last note from our friends at Monkey Knife Fight. Football is officially back on Monkey Knife Fight, and with all the action, NFL action you're looking for. And if college football is more your speed, they've got plenty of that, too. On Monkey Knife Fight, there's no sharks, no salary caps, and no math. It's just easy to play, easy to win, daily fantasy player props. Join now at monkeyknifefight.com, and you'll get your first game free. Then use promo code RWNFL to get your first deposit matched instantly up to $100. So, what are you waiting for? Join Monkey Knife Fight today. So, Seattle faces the Rams, goes to LA to face them. We don't know who they're going to be facing at quarterback or a lot of other positions as well. This is a tough watch now. We saw Bryce Perkins get the start against the Chiefs. Chiefs got like the most pedestrian of covers in this one here.
Yeah.
I was really rooting for the Chiefs to go for it and miss on 4th down late, so that way we could get the cover when it was 13-10. I had a lot of near misses in staff picks this week, and this was one of them.
Yeah, I saw you tweeting about it. I was on the other end of this one, so we were kind of rooting for opposite outcomes. Right. Although I went 0 for 3 on Thanksgiving Day, so I came into Sunday already licking my wounds, losing some of those. But yeah, the Chiefs. I think if you go back and replay some of the possessions that they had in the second half, like almost always this game finishes with the Chiefs having like 38 points. And, Mahomes throws a pick in the end zone. They have to settle for 2 field goals late. They had another 13-play drive and a 12-play drive ended field goals. In the first half, they just, they had the early touchdown to Travis Kelce. And other than that, it was just a kind of a classic sleepwalking type of game for the Chiefs. It hit the hallmark of Sky Moore muffing a punt. We've seen that a couple times this year. You go back to the Indianapolis game. It felt like that one kind of set in motion a lackadaisical performance for the Chiefs. But I thought all things considered, the Rams defense played fairly well. The Chiefs ran the ball 30 times for only 117 yards. It felt like Pacheco had like 7 runs where he was 1 tackle away from breaking a long one, but never really did that. Had a long rush of only 9 yards on 22 carries. Still love the way he runs. He just really gets after it, keeps the legs going. I'm shocked that Mahomes threw the ball 42 times in this game. I don't think that was the plan. And you can tell Andy Reid, usually after a win, he's pretty, happy-go-lucky. He was not after this one. I think he was a little perturbed, we'll say, by the Chiefs' execution on offense.
This was a classic look-ahead game, though.
It really was.
They had the Sunday night road game against the Chargers with the big comeback win, huge win. They basically locked up to the division by winning that game. They go to Cincinnati next week. We talked about that. I mean, you can't be at 180,000, 180 amps or whatever. I'm making up. I don't even know how many amps is good. I was trying to say amped up and try to do over 100%. So just don't do that. You can't be at full capacity every single week. It's hard to. I mean, it's really difficult to emotionally. This was a game where it's a clear look ahead, and they got through it. I think that's all there is to it there. And now they got a big game coming up on the road in Cincy, a revenge game for them. They lost twice to the Bengals last year, so that they want to be able to be able to kind of come up big. So I think you can kind of overlook the downside of this game and think that they're going to still be pretty strong.
I think so too. Like you said, classic look ahead game, classic letdown game. I think once Matthew Stafford was ruled out, I think that put this in letdown game watch territory. And Bryce Perkins, do you really have any notes on him? I mean, it was not a great day throwing the ball for Bryce Perkins. Did have a touchdown to Van Jefferson, but for the most part, struggled at back-to-back picks in the second half that really helped deliver that cover for the Kansas City Chiefs. I thought, as a runner, he had a couple big third downs that he converted, 9 for 44 on the ground. That's obviously something that Matthew Stafford does not offer whatsoever, but there was not a whole lot from Bryce Perkins here for me to say like, well, maybe once Matthew Stafford moves on, he could be the guy. I don't really see that being the case, but we might get an extended look at him over these next few weeks. I mean, not only is Cooper Kupp out, we have no idea what's up with Matthew Stafford. Allen Robinson now set for season-ending surgery. So the hits continue to come for that Rams offense.
I think we'll see Perkins and Wolford the rest of the way.
I think so too.
And I think neither is something to build off of. This is a get through the season sort of scenario here. The worst part for the Rams too is they're going to have this disaster season, and then it's going to be a high draft pick that they won't have. It's going to the Lions for the Jared Goff deal.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, we're seeing that, and kind of a similar situation with Denver too. I mean, there might be two teams picking in the top 5 that end up handing over their picks. Something you see a little more often in the NBA. I mean, the Rams they're home for Seattle next week. They get the Raiders. They're at the Packers. Circle this one on the calendar, Jeff. Rams Broncos Christmas Day, mid-afternoon. CBS.
What a present! I will. That will be the time. Hey, let's do our presents now.
Yeah, please. Like, get out of the house, go for a
walk. I will watch the
do
condensed version later. Thank you. Yes.
That is awful. Awful. I mean, it could get to the point though where it might be so bad that it'll be fun to watch. Like the Broncos for me have reached that territory. The Rams are more in like sad territory right now, but another month from now, that they could creep closer to the Broncos. So I'll be watching it. I'm not going to feel good about it. I'll be interested to see what the total ends up being for that game. If we have a look ahead total, it's got to be like 27.
What type of bad football do you prefer? I prefer like my bad football teams to be like can't stop anybody, but at least have some offensive upside. Lions, give me the Lions. I watch them all the time. Man, Broncos, the Rams, they're boring. The Saints, I'll throw them into that mix. I don't want to watch them. I just don't.
Yeah, if you're going to be low scoring, there needs to be some like real disaster potential. That's what's been frustrating about the Broncos. It's like, yeah, Russell Wilson has turned it over, but it's not like he's making these reckless plays. Like they are so wildly conservative that it is soul crushing to watch. Like there's nothing exciting happening in those games. And I think you could argue that, that this Raiders Seahawks game, 74 points were scored. There was not a lot of great football being played. It was a lot of defensive letdowns more than anything else. I mean, you don't get to 576 yards on offense when the other defense is playing well. I mean, Seattle was just woefully underprepared for this game, which
was wild coming out of the bye like that too.
You would think.
But one other comment about Raiders and the Raiders Seattle game, and I tweeted about this, so I don't know if you saw it, but I'm watching the Grid channel on DirecTV, on the Sunday ticket package that I have, and I swear it's like WandaVision. It looks like it's in black and white with little splotches of color here and there when things go wrong. Whereas the other 3 games are these bright red and yellow and all these other colors. But you got the turf in Seattle looks kind of grayish.
Yeah.
You've got the white. Yeah. It looks like it's just it's broadcast in a different network or broadcast in a different camera or something like that. It's just, it's so wild. Every once in a while, they panned up to the stands and you can see the fans in their real colors and all that. And it's like, okay, yeah, that looks like it. But on the field, that long view, it looked like it was just such a black and white sort of game.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously the Raiders uniforms, aren't doing a whole lot of help there. But yeah, the
Right.
turf, for whatever reason, the turf in Seattle, at least in the feed that I was watching, was like 60% gray, 40% green. I don't know what's
Right.
going on there, if that's
Right.
like some sort of late season atmospheric thing or what. But it was almost like they had put some sort of filter on the camera. I don't mind it. I don't mind a little visual variance, but yeah, the Raiders going with the white dominant jerseys on a gray field it did kind of resemble like an early 90s broadcast.
Yeah, that's how I felt watching that game. All right, one last game. Eagles, Packers. A lot of green in this one here. Kind of mentioned this at the top a little bit, but hey, this was the Jordan Love game at the end of the game. But before that, it was, hey, the Eagles are running. Hey, the Eagles are running. Oh, hey, the Eagles are running again. 363 rushing yards in this game. Hurts goes for 157 himself, doesn't get in the end zone. It would have been nice to get one of those, especially that sequence there. I think at the third touchdown where he got tackled near the goal line twice in a row. I was like, I knew it was. And then, of course, Sanders got the love at the end. Gainwell had a rushing touchdown. Miles Sanders, though, 21 for 143. Who cares if he doesn't catch passes? He went off.
Yeah, the Green Bay rushing defense, I think, was the story in this one, especially with Hurts, who, I mean, did the vast majority of his work in the first half. Like you said, that the second play where he was stopped at the goal line, I thought he was going to walk in. Usually Jalen Hurts gets that angle, but it was a rare good tackle by the Green Bay defense in this game. 363 yards for Philly. That is the 8th most ever in NFL history in a game. The most since last year. The Baltimore Ravens ran for 404 yards on the Cincinnati Bengals in week 17. I'm sure you remember that game better than I do. I don't remember
It's because the Bengals threw for like 800 against them, so it didn't matter.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that was late, but Bengals blew them out in that game.
No, this was, maybe this was 2 seasons ago. I think I'm getting the years mixed up. It was January 3rd, 2021. This was the Brandon Allen game.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Say no more. Yeah. That year never happened. That's fine. That's why it's buried. It's in the recesses of my memories, but yeah. Last night, though, I mean, Rodgers made some plays early. Yeah, the touchdown throw to Aaron Jones was just a thing of beauty. But yeah, I mean, it was a tough watch seeing like, okay, now he's hurt, he's gutting it out, he's obliquing it out, as the case may be. That was a tough watch. It was encouraging to see Jordan Love look like a competent NFL quarterback. I don't know, situationally, I mean, Philly was playing the prevent the win defense a little bit there. But still, he connected on that wide open pass to Watson. Watson did the rest. Showed the capability that he has, at least.
Yeah, I think there was maybe a little bit of an overreaction to Jordan Love making what was I thought a fairly routine throw. Like you said, Philly playing pretty soft at that point, but this was the best that Jordan Love has looked, which is maybe saying more about how his other cameos have gone in the past. But I mean, for me, that was more about Christian Watson. It's like, when's the last time the Packers have had a guy who could make that catch and go untouched 63 yards to the end zone? I mean, that was an impressive play by Watson, who's now up to 6 touchdowns over the last 3 weeks. He's 7-1, Jeff, to win Rookie of the Year at this point, which more so speaks to the rest of the field. I mean, it's basically Watson, Wilson, Olave, and Kenneth Walker is the favorite, but these last 2 weeks, I think, have kind of reopened the field and reopened that debate. So somehow Christian Watson could actually end up, being a top 3 Rookie of the Year candidate, despite not really doing anything the entire first half of the season. Rodgers had the 2 picks. First one was a little rough. Second one, if you're kind of reading online, there were some breakdowns that, I think it was his tight end, needs to run that route a little more shallow. Kind of didn't do a good job of cutting off the safety, but nice play nonetheless. But by that safety for the Philadelphia Eagles. Yep. I remain convinced that Rodgers is not really washed up. You still see the highs. You mentioned that touchdown throw to Aaron Jones. That was vintage Aaron Rodgers. Like, he does not look anything like late career Drew Brees, late career Phillip Rivers, late career Peyton Manning. Like, I don't think he's entered that phase of his career, but I also think there's a chance that maybe we've seen him take his last snap of the season, depending on what goes on with this oblique injury. Obviously, he revealed this past week that he's dealing with a broken thumb. He did say post-game that as long as they're mathematically alive, he's going to be out there. So I think chances are he does play at least one more week, but I think we're trending toward a future where Jordan Love probably starts multiple games at the end of the year. And then we now go into, for the 3rd straight year, this whirlwind of will he or won't he come back next season, talking about Rodgers.
Yep. It was funny seeing how that was revealed with some Make-A-Wish person there, and it reveals it. And then it's so funny, like, Rappaport was so quick to acknowledge that it was somebody else that broke it because it wasn't Glazer or Schefter or anything like that. It's funny how they play that game, but it was also revealed it's an avulsion fracture. There's also issues with the ligament, and it just damages each other each time he throws. Basically, they have the bye in week 14. Seems like this would be a perfect week to just say, we're going to rest you this week. Come back after the bye. They need to see Jordan Love play. They have to make this decision about, okay, are we just going to let him go? Or are we going to get that 5th year? I mean, they have to make this decision. They need to be informed about it. They got to play him some.
Exactly. And if there's a silver lining to this season just going completely haywire for Green Bay, it's that I think they're now going to have that built-in opportunity, right? I don't think they came into this season saying, well, hopefully we'll get 4 games where we can start Jordan Love at the end of the year. No, that was not the plan at all. But I think there's a decent chance that we see Rodgers start this next game against the Bears. If you win, maybe it becomes a little more complicated depending on what else happens around the NFC in week 13. But like you said, with that week 14 bye, I think the natural progression here is that maybe we see Jordan Love come out of that bye. He starts against the Rams. And like you said, you owe it to Jordan Love. You owe it to the organization to at least see what you have here. And it feels like a complete, incomplete grade so far on Jordan Love. I don't think that we've seen enough that you could say definitively one way or the other whether or not you need to move on from this guy. It's going to be complicated no matter what, though, because ultimately this decision lies with Aaron Rodgers, right? If he walks away this offseason, that makes everything significantly easier. If he says, I'm coming back, not only do you have to kind of reset, get that roster built back up around Rodgers for what you'd think would be one more dance or whatever you want to, the last dance for like the 4th time. But then, like you said, you need to make that long-term decision on Jordan Love. I mean, it's a mess. It's a mess that they created. I think if they could do it over, they probably would have just never made the Jordan Love pick. And who knows how the course of recent history goes for the Green Bay Packers. But at least you come out of last night feeling a little bit encouraged about Jordan Love. And for the most part, that's not really something you could say over the last 2 years.
Yeah. I'll be nice. I won't say who they should have taken in the Jordan Love spot, and we'll move on.
Not a certain Cincinnati Bengals receiver, right?
Not a certain one there. Never would have suggested that.
Nope.
Never came to me. Never thought about it there. Any other thoughts from week 12 before we sign off?
No, man. I just wish that the Jags had found another way, or had found one way to win against the Colts or the Texans, because I think things would be significantly more interesting for me the rest of the way. I think they just kind of dug themselves too big of a hole, but at least I could sit back and be excited about watching this team. I no longer go into every game just like extremely nervous. Like, how are the Jags going to embarrass themselves this week? They seem to have emerged from that. At least they're a competent organization. And look, I'm just excited for the rest of this season. It has, as always, flown by. All of a sudden it's week 13 and it feels like things are closing in on us, but Bengals are rolling. I think the AFC is going to be really fun. I kind of hope the Dolphins could keep this up, be that kind of wild card team that could make some noise in the playoffs. But we're set for a really fun finish, and going to be a sprint to the finish for the fantasy season as well.
Yep. Fantasy playoffs coming up soon. So I love it. Love seeing it there. And Scott won $4,000 playing in his high stakes leagues, thanks to listening to us and among other things. So good on you, Scott. Love seeing that. That's awesome. All right, guys, good luck tonight if you have any irons in the fire, and we'll talk to you again next Monday. Catch us, of course, every night on Sirius XM Fantasy from 8 to 10 Eastern Time. Got Joe and Jake tomorrow with free agents. I'm going to have Jeff Feinberg joining us on Wednesday, so excited about that as well. Thanks for listening. Take care.